Greetings. It's Monday, April the 21st, 2025. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Monday Morning Report. Pope Francis is dead. He passed away the day after Easter, actually just a few hours after Easter, and a few hours after making a final appearance in St. Peter's Square in his Pope-mobile. He was 88 years old, and he had been suffering from pneumonia for some weeks now. As you recall, a while back, he was expected to pass away rather quickly, but he held on for a few months. He was the first pope named Francis, and the first who was a Jesuit. And by any measurement, he was controversial. He was called by his detractors the first communist pope. And given his social views on things, that isn't too far off, although I think a little extreme. He was condemned by many here in the United States for his outspoken support of not deporting invaders who have illegally taken up residence in our country, a significant portion of whom I must point out are coming from predominantly Roman Catholic countries. Now, whatever you thought of the guy, he wasn't boring in his views, and although there have been some truly evil men who have headed up the Roman Catholic Church, if you take a sincere and honest look at Francis, how he lived, what he valued, and how he treated people, regular people, he wasn't one of them. Maybe naive by some standards of those of us who are not part of that faith. But there's far worse people in the world, and there have been far worse people who have headed up the Holy See. It'll be interesting to see what direction the world's largest Christian denomination will be taking in the coming months and years. The Vatican, if it's known for anything, is political intrigue behind the scenes, because it heads up a religion that's adhered to by anywhere from 1 to nearly 2 billion people. Quite significant. The Roman Catholic Church has power. Whether you believe it or not, it has power. Back to the other side of the world, the Trump administration has been blocked by the Supreme Court from deporting people using the Enemies Alien Act. Now, a real constitutional crisis is at work here, because once the Supreme Court has a say on something, that's it, at least as far as that part of the government's concerned. So you have the judiciary branch of our country fighting with the executive branch. That's happened before. It happened during the Civil War when the Supreme Court was declaring all sorts of things unconstitutional. Well, Abraham Lincoln just ignored them most of the time. One would think Trump might want to do that here. Well, this could be what kills us in the end, folks. And this is not an exaggeration. I mean, the three branches of government are supposed to fight each other, supposed to be at odds. That's the whole reason for the system, so that no one branch controls the other. Well, that's usually when you stay in your playpen and you don't throw your toys too far into the other kids. Well, there are many things that are being pointed out that are clearly the job of the executive branch that the activist judges of the various federal benches have been trying to influence. From where I sit and from my background in constitutional studies, I could say that the Trump administration has the right to do a lot of what they're doing. It's just that you're dealing with judges that think that laws are made by judges, and they're not. They're made by the legislative branch, which is often the other side of things. It should be pointed out, folks, that constitutions can be the worst of dictators. The law can be your enemy, as so many who were persecuted for being in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021 can attest to. In fact, if you remember the movie Mad Max, the original one that Mel Gibson was in when he was a very young man, there were some scenes in there where in the midst of growing chaos, there's a courtroom where judges are talking about the rights of someone who's obviously a sick animal who should just be taken out in the back of the courthouse and shot. And we're kind of getting into that at this point. Not that bad. We don't have people dressed up in leather and driving crazy vehicles down the highway with guns. Well, actually, we do, come to think of it. Unfortunately, many of the people who supported Trump are now concerned he's setting aside due process in exchange for expediency and what many believe is a national emergency. Funny that. I mean, what did you people expect? You can't have change without change. Trump is not a dictator. Anyone who has a reasonable command of history will know that. People are just so used to ineffective and corrupt and incompetent government, they've become just about immune to it. They're frightened of change. And if things don't change, the alternative is going to be a lot worse than uncomfortable. Remember what Aristotle said. It is better for a city to be governed by a good man than by good laws. Meanwhile, the opioid genocide of Americans continues, unabated for the most part. Poison pouring in from China, usually by way of Mexico and Canada. To go back to it, this is one of the reasons for the tariff war that's erupted, why the U.S. is angry, or the U.S. government, the current administration, is angry at Canada. Mexico is not really a country anymore. It's a landmass run by warlords with a lot of money and a lot of weapons and a lot of bloodthirsty thugs working for them. But the opioid crisis is not all about tattooed gang members from the back streets who like to cut off heads and cut out hearts, Aztec style. Big Pharma, yeah, that's equally, if not more, responsible for the American addiction to pain pills that seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. A country and a culture being destroyed because they think happiness comes in a bottle and not one that you drink from, one that you pop pills from. In this department, a song that's become the anthem for what is hopefully a growing movement to end this horror and punish the people who are arguably guilty of crimes against humanity is a song by a country singer named Mary Cutter, and it's entitled "The Devil Wore a Lab Coat." Check it out. I'm not a big fan of country music, to be honest, but this song I like. Lyrics are very clever, and boy, do they hit home. You might find it inspiring, maybe inspiring enough to join the cause and stop America's spin into the abyss. And speaking of horrible crimes visited on the American people, is there anything new on the Jeffrey Epstein files? Really? Nothing? Nothing yet? No arrests? No indictments? Anything? Okay. Didn't think so. And back to more trouble in the world. Potential war between Iran and the United States, courtesy of Israel, is still a threat. Although it's not in the headlines, not being talked about, it's still there. Just because it's not on the evening news doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Some talk of Israel going ahead and striking Iranian nuclear-related targets on their own. This way, the U.S. will be drawn into the fight. I think I've heard that story before someplace. When was that? A long time ago. Not that long ago, maybe. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most dangerous things that can happen to a nation and its people is to be under the undue influence of another country and its agents, and to provide that country with blind obedience and misplaced loyalty. Think about that. And speaking of wars, there was an Easter ceasefire of sorts between Ukraine and Russia. Didn't seem to hold very long, though. Reports of what's really going on there are scattered, and they're not as reliable as they used to be. A lot of people have left. A lot of people died. We had some good reporting there, but, I guess they've moved on to other things or more rational things. It looks like the Trump administration is losing interest in trying to put an end to that insane waste of life And I can't say I blame him. It seems to be a lost cause unless both sides want to do something about it. And there are many people out there that think this has not really harmed Russia as much. It has greatly. It's done an awful lot of damage to both countries. It always goes that way in any war. It's never a slam dunk. Probably the closest we've had to a slam dunk is when the United States invaded Grenada back in the 1980s. That's about as much of a slam dunk as you get these days. And that was like an elephant stepping on not even a flea, more like an atom. Trump was promising he'd be ending that war real quickly, but you can't make peace with people that don't want to make peace, Mr. President. Really. I mean, that's something that a lot of people have figured out. I know that it makes no sense to you. It makes no sense to me why these two are at each other, but you can't stop madmen from being mad. One thing that has been demonstrated in this war, and this is really important, is that the deadly effectiveness of drones on the battlefield is the thing now. Now, I know that we've been talking about drones that have been flying up in the air and dropping bombs on, terrorists and people like that, but no, these little things that have a small explosive charge, a little cheap camera, and are operated by remote, chasing down individual soldiers and blowing them into pieces, that's new. And that is something that the future is going to be about, the very near future. And I'm not aware of anything the Americans have in their arsenal like that, at least as effective as the way the Russians have been deploying them, or the Ukrainians for that matter. Those little cheap things have been talked about for years by so-called futurists, of when you will have little robots hunting you down and killing you. You'll be able to put a program in them to look for your face, and the government or some power wants to get rid of you. It sends it out, looks for you, and just does you in. Kind of like something called a Hunter Seeker out of the Dune science fiction series, except the Hunter Seeker didn't seem to be as advanced as this. No, I think we're in for a very nasty recurrent epidemic of something called generals fighting the last war, because I think if the Americans get into a dust-up with these smaller countries that have had to use technology more effectively because they don't have the manpower or something, you're going to see an awful lot of unpleasantness. But this can also be put into the hands of criminals, assassins, jealous wives and husbands. I mean, what are we doing to ourselves with these one-time toys? At one time, you'd have a drone up in there to take pictures of your backyard. Now you're going to have it to hunt down people you don't like. I don't care what anyone says. Every time humans come up with a new form of technology, well, they always find a way to bring out the worst in it. Now, a bit of housekeeping. I've been working on a couple of books on my own. This has taken a lot of my time, and I've also been working as the editor for a couple of others. I'm also in production of a book of my poetry and photography. That's a lot more work than you might think it is, and that's been something many of you have enjoyed over the years, and some of you over the decades, and I'm going to finally put it all into a book. It's going to take some time to do, though. I'm working on it. I hope to have it out sometime in the summer. Maybe the early autumn. I also have the new segments. The one, of course, is Movie Night. The reason I came up with that was because many of you were asking, what do you have against movies? Why do you hate movies? Is there something wrong with you? The cigarette-smoking man in the old X-File TV show hated movies. No, I'm not the cigarette-smoking man from the X-Files, nor do I hate movies. I hate bad movies. I hate politically correct movies. And I don't even hate them. I just ignore them, kind of the way you ignore cockroaches, if you can avoid them. So that's why I came up with that, because I started to try to do some research into some quality films that people have not seen in years. And some of them are quite good. There's some brilliant, brilliant movies out there. Many people talk about movies like, say, Casablanca, but how many people actually go out and see it? So I decided to do something about that. As you know, on Wednesdays or Thursdays, there is something called a midweek report, which I will be using to augment what I do on Monday mornings because a lot of stuff does happen and it's happening quickly. And to have everything in one 30-minute broadcast once a week is not as efficient as maybe two going 15 or 20 minutes. You can cover more that way. And I've just started something called the Banned Book Society, and boy, did I get a response for that. I got not only email, but phone calls of people recommending books I have not heard of. And some of them seem really, really interesting. It's going to be, if you haven't heard the announcement, the Banned Book Society will be for members only, as will upcoming features I've been writing, because, frankly, I can't do this for nothing. Which leads me to another sign-off. Many people have been subscribing. I've seen a massive uptick in subscribers, and I thank you for that, but I'd like you to all consider, please, a paid subscription. It's $5 a month, $50 a year, and that's a pretty good deal. Because back in the day, I'd be making a very good living doing what I'm doing now. These days, if you do anything remotely related to journalism, it's the equivalent of standing on a street corner reading the paper and having people toss money into your hat on the ground. If I'm going to continue this, I do need to have more support. Okay, I've been able to augment this with other ways of making a living so that I can keep doing it, and it's getting harder and harder. And I do need new equipment. I've had a fundraiser for some time. There's been money put up there, not much. There's been some private stuff. But I need a very big setup to do what I really want to do, and that includes video. Again, I am also going to be moving. All right, I am making plans to move to a better location, one that'll give me better reach into newsmakers and a lot more things going on. I am planning on in-person interviews, several people, including some famous ones, and others that are just plain interesting that aren't so famous. And that's what I want to do. If you remember back in the 1960s and 70s, there was a CBS correspondent named Charles Kuralt who used to go on the road in America and interview interesting people talking about interesting things, because not all news is bad or controversial or something you got to sweat about. There's still a lot of good going on in our world, like it or not, and that's worth talking about. And telling stories is what journalism is supposed to be about, even a journalist as opinionated as this one. So that's what I have planned for you, and I would urge you to support me in this endeavor. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, as I like to say, but at the same time, share with your pocketbook. I could really use it. If I'm going to make this thing really go as far as it can go, I can't do it for nothing, and I can't do it out of my pocket. So I want to thank you for that. And those of you who have been supportive and have been subscribing and have been sharing and have been giving me feedback, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. What my job is to tell stories, good ones, as accurate as possible, and as interesting as possible. Because at the end of the day, humans are all about being human. We're not lone wolves. Lone wolves die. Wolves are pack animals. They're part of a community. And for people like myself, I like to think of myself as part of a community that seems to be growing worldwide, listening to what I'm telling you, and that's an honor. And it's a humbling honor at that. So thank you. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies. Hopefully they'll become friends. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, Clown World and the Deep State must, really must, be destroyed. Good day.